You should all now receive a notice that we are live streaming. If you could just accept that. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that live streaming has commenced. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, council. Good afternoon, town staff and members of the viewing public. I see that we have quorum for tonight's meeting. So I call to order this public meeting under the Planning Act on Monday, January 16th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. As is always the case, we will now have the land recognition statement. And tonight, Councillor Olson shall be reading it. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor. I also like to remind our viewing public that today's meeting, again by Zoom, as work is continuing on Town Hall Edition, which involves the council chambers. We now turn to the Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have some opening remarks. I'd kindly ask Ms. Wilford to share her screen. Public meeting under the Planning Act, Monday, January 16th at 5:30 p.m. All Town of Pelham in-person public meetings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all public meetings electronically via Zoom. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the subject application. Participants are reminded, please ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you will be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will also not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participants will remain in the waiting room until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by council, you will be placed back into the waiting room where you may continue to view the meeting. The Zoom chat is not monitored nor recommended to contact the clerk's department. Please contact us via email at clerks@pelham.ca. This email address is monitored during the public portion of the meeting. Decorum. The public meeting under the Planning Act is a formal public hearing requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to address council at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note that all comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will also not be tolerated. Please note that if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given the opportunity to speak to council during the public portion of the meeting. Please note that after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent will have the opportunity to address the public comments and concerns at one time. Please note, all comments stated and received electronically form part of the public record and will be considered by planning staff when preparing their recommendation report for council's consideration. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is to follow on the staff presentation. Contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. For you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the adoption of agenda. I have an amendment put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda be amended to add item 4.3.1 to you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment, is there any further discussion? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Nisnik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda for the January 16th, 2023 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. On the agenda as amended, is there any discussion or comments? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Kniznik,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to the disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Well, thank you. After viewing the agenda, is there any councillor that has a pecuniary interest to declare? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. I've so noted. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item 4, and I will now read the notice requirements into the record. Town of Pelham application for zoning bylaw amendment, 105 Welland Road, file number AM/07/2022. Zoning bylaw amendment to allow the use of the property for a 6-story, 48-unit apartment dwelling and recognize the location of the church as new parking area. The Planning Act requires under section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for informing the public in respect of the proposed amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on November 30th, 2022. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the Town of Pelham's website and will also be displayed on this last slide of the staff presentation to follow. If any person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore any comments received will be considered by council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have Senior Planner Shannon Larocque with us.
Okay, Ms. Larocque, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to share my presentation. This public meeting is for property located at 105 Welland Road, and the application is for a zoning bylaw amendment. This property is located at the northwest corner of Welland Road and Pelham Street, and it's the current location of the Concordia Lutheran Church. The application requests a rezoning of a portion of the lands to a site-specific residential multiple 2 zone that would permit a 6-story apartment dwelling containing 48 units, and the remainder of the lands would remain institutional, with the zoning changed to recognize the location of the existing church as well as the new parking area. And those changes that are being requested are reflected on the site plan that's been submitted with this application. And I'll show that in just a moment here. This is the proposed building elevation for the 6-story apartment building. This is the view from Welland Road. You can see there is the main floor contains indoor parking. There is 1 floor of underground parking below, and then 5 stories of residential apartments. This is the rear building elevation. That indoor and underground parking would be accessed through the rear of the building. And this front portion of the building here up on top, that is intended for amenity space for the future residents of this building. This is the site plan that's been submitted with the application, and that's how the requested zoning regulations are reflected in terms of how the site would build out. You can see the site has been divided into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is the location of the existing church building and the newly configured parking area. Part 2 is the area where the proposed 6-story apartment building would be located. You can see that there is a proposed driveway along the west side of the building. as well as 11 at-grade parking stalls, 2 of which are accessible near the front. The waste collection bins are to be stored right here. They would be Moloch containers. And this amenity space indicated here is the location of mature trees that currently exist on the property and are intended to be preserved. In terms of the 2 parts shown here, if this application for zoning bylaw amendment were approved, the developer would then apply for a consent to sever to separate parts 1 and part 2. At that point, they would then be 2 separate lots. And the developer would also require approval of site plan applications with the town to deal with a detailed engineering design for both the parking area and for this development here. The planning framework for this property includes that it's within the settlement area of the provincial policy statement. This is the area that is supposed to be where most development, redevelopment, and intensification takes place. It's really supposed to be an area where efficient use is made of infrastructure, land, and resources. And the property is within the delineated built-up area in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. 50% of all new residential development is to occur within this area.
Like in a watch-only mode.
The Niagara Region's new official plan designates the property as delineated built-up area. This area requires a range and mix of densities, lot and unit sizes, as well as housing types that are planned to meet housing needs at all stages of life. 25% of all
Let you into the room. You're sitting in the waiting room.
residential units. Thank you. Residential units in the town annually are to be located in this area. And residential development is encouraged to incorporate sustainability into its design and construction. The town of Pelham's official plan designates this property as being within the urban living area and the built boundary. This designation permits basically all types of housing, including apartment dwellings, as well as institutional and neighborhood commercial uses. And there are some policies contained within the town's official plan that are to guide council when they're decision-making on development applications. One of those policies includes policy B115 that indicates that when considering a zoning bylaw amendment for apartments, council must be satisfied that the proposal respects the character of adjacent residential neighborhoods in terms of the height, bulk, and massing, that it can be easily integrated with surrounding land uses, that the development will not cause or create hazards, traffic hazards, or undue traffic congestion on surrounding roads, and is located on a site with adequate land area to incorporate required parking, recreational facilities, landscaping, and buffering on site. And for information purposes, the town's zoning bylaw 4481/2022 was approved by council in August. This is the new comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town. This bylaw is currently under appeal, and so it does not have status. However, for information purposes, the lands are zoned institutional, which permits a number of different institutional uses, as well as apartment dwellings, daycare center, long-term care, municipal government or public uses, schools, a number of traditional institutional uses. And the zoning bylaw that is currently in effect is zoning bylaw 1136/1987. In this bylaw, the property, again, is still institutional. And the request is for the site-specific RM2 on Part 2 that would permit the apartment dwelling subject to the site-specific regulations that are needed to develop in the way that is shown on the site plan. And there are also changes to the institutional zone that are being requested to recognize the location of the church and the new parking area. Council and perhaps some members of the public may note that that's slightly different than what was indicated in the information report that was prepared by staff. That report indicated that the developer was requesting that the institutional uses be expanded and that the regulations today be changed to reflect what was permitted in the new comprehensive bylaw that's under appeal. Since that time, the developer has clarified that instead they simply want to recognize the location of the church and its new parking area, with the knowledge that those additional regulations and permissions will come into effect at the time that the new comprehensive bylaw comes into effect. The requested zone regulations for apartments are reflected on the next couple of slides. They include a minimum lot area of 80 square meters per dwelling unit, a deletion of the minimum lot depth and maximum density, an increase in the maximum lot coverage to 50%, allowing a minimum front yard of 3 meters and a minimum rear yard of 12 meters, allowing for an interior side yard of 3 meters, recognizing the maximum building height that's being requested of 6 stories or 22 meters, a deletion of the minimum floor area per dwelling unit requirement and the amenity area requirement. And there are also some of the general provisions that are being requested to change to recognize the parking layout for the apartment building. Those include allowance for 1.25 spaces per unit, a total of 60 spaces, allowing for a driveway width of 6 meters, allowing the parking area to be located 3 meters from the street line or 1.9 meters to the lot line, a slight reduction in the dimensions of parking spaces to 2.6 meters by 5.8 meters deep. Whoops. And that's the end of the changes for the apartment dwelling. In terms of the request for the institutional portion of the property, part 1, which contains the existing church, the only change requested with respect to the building location is a 3-meter setback. That setback would be required at the time that a consent would be approved to allow the creation of that second lot, at which time the setback from the existing building to the new lot line would be 3 meters. There are also some changes to the parking requirements that are being requested to allow for the new parking lot layout. Those include requirements of 3.5 spaces per 100 square meters of gross leasable floor area for the church use. Again, allowing that driveway access to be 6 meters wide. And finally, a reduction to the planting strip requirement where abutting a residential use down to 1.5 meters. And in this case, that 1.5 meter planting strip would abut this new residential apartment building if that were approved. This application was circulated to town departments and commenting agencies, and the following comments were received. The Niagara region offered no objections, subject to a holding provision that would be satisfied at such time that archaeology were addressed satisfactorily. Town Public Works provided some technical comments that would inform a future site plan approval application. Canada Post indicated that they had no comments. Enbridge Gas had no objection, and Niagara Catholic District School Board indicated that the development would likely generate an enrollment increase at St. Alexander Kruska Catholic Elementary School. And a number of public comments were received on this application, as council can see from the agenda. I've just listed on here the comments that were received by name at this time, just because there are so many and council has them in full in the agenda package. And of course, we'll hear from a number of people tonight, as well as a number of written comments. There were also a couple of petitions that were received, one traditional hard copy petition and one from change.org. And I think both are in the agenda package. There were a number of themes that were received, many common themes in terms of the comments and the questions and the concerns. Those include a lack of community and character fit in terms of the density and the housing type, concerns by adjacent residents with respect to privacy, loss of views and shadowing, some concerns about changes to air movements, concerns about light impacts from both headlights and parking lot lighting. There were concerns about noise, many concerns over traffic and road safety impacts. There was concern about overflow of parking onto neighboring streets. Many concerns about the ability for the infrastructure to handle the additional capacity from the development. Concerns that the Property values would be negatively impacted in the neighborhood. There were some concerns and questions over the potential that this development, if approved, might set a precedent. There were a number of concerns and mentions about the removal of the mature trees on the property. Some residents were concerned about potential damage to adjacent properties during the construction process. A number of people cited the absence of affordable housing in the development. There were some mentions of the lack of amenity space on site. Some concerns were provided about flooding and drainage impacts. Some questions about the adequacy of fire trucks, of the town's fire trucks to service this development in the event of an emergency. Some residents had concerns about increased litter in the area. And of course, there was some comments that there was a lack of need for this type of development in the town. It should also be noted, I think today there were a couple of letters received in support of the application. Those have not yet, or were not captured on this slide. And there were some technical reports that were provided with this application. They include a planning justification report, a functional servicing report, and a shadow study. Those were the reports that had been received at the time that this presentation was prepared. However, last week, some additional reports were received, and those include an angular plane analysis, a noise feasibility study, a geotechnical investigation, and a traffic impact study. Digital copies of all of those reports are available by contacting me through the contact information on the final slide of this presentation. And in conclusion, and as stated previously by the Deputy Clerk, there are no decisions being made tonight, no recommendations coming forward from planning staff at this time. The purpose of the meeting is to receive input and clarification. And once all of the information, the comments and the questions have been heard, then at that point, planning staff will consider all of the information and prepare a recommendation report for council's decision at a later date. If anyone wishes to receive notices, they will receive them if they've provided written comments already or registered to speak tonight. If anybody has not provided written comments or registered to speak, they can contact myself or the clerk, and we will put you on the list to receive future notices regarding this application. And any questions or comments or requests for copies of plans or the reports can be directed to me, Shannon LaRocque, Senior Planner at the town, extension 319, or by email slarocque@pelham.ca. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. LaRocque, for that presentation. I will now turn to the Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the agent, Mr. William Hycoop, in the meeting with us, as well as the applicant, Stephen Kaiser, and various members of the applicant's team. I understand that Mr. Hycoop has a presentation, and I'd welcome him to share his screen.
Okay. Mr. Hycoop, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to pass it over to Stephen Kaiser to make some introductory remarks.
Okay.
Stephen, if you could unmute yourself, please.
How's that? Are we good?
Yep, we can hear you now, Mr. Kaiser.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, those participating in the meeting and those watching remotely. As I said, my name's Stephen Kaiser and I'm a partner with Niagara Innovative Living in this development proposal. In terms of my background, I've been working in the land development industry, residential construction for almost 36 years. I'm a past president of the Niagara Homebuilders Association, the Ontario Homebuilders Association, and the Urban Development Institute. In a former role, I was vice president of residential operations at one of Canada's largest residential construction companies. For the past 20 years or so, I focused my efforts largely here in Niagara. Most importantly, I've enjoyed living in this town for the past 60 years. In terms of tonight's meeting, our group has been working on this development proposal for almost 2 years. First, starting with initial discussions with Concordia Lutheran Church regarding the land purchase, and then working to cover off all the development aspects required for the presentation you will hear this evening. To say that there seems to be concern regarding our proposal expressed from local area residents is probably somewhat of an understatement. I've read the letters sent to the town and the concerns expressed on the online petition. My hope is that our presentation this evening will address a host of those concerns and give council and those participating a much better understanding and comfort level of what we are presenting, the context of the proposal, and the information and the underlying studies we've completed related to the development. Speaking on behalf of our proposal this evening is David Braun from Concordia Lutheran Church, William Haiku from Upper Canada Consultants, who have completed the planning and engineering to date on the file, Emilio Raimondo, our design architect from Raimondo and Associate Architects, and Greg Tremere, my partner from Niagara Innovative Living. It's now my pleasure to introduce David Braun from the church to provide some comments from the perspective of the church.
Thank you, Stephen. Dear Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and those joining the Zoom meeting, my name is David Braun, and I'm a member of council at Concordia Lutheran Church. On behalf of the council and members of Concordia Lutheran Church, we are in support of the vision as being presented by Stephen Kaiser, Niagara Innovative Living, for the 1 acre lot to be severed west of the church building. Over the past 18 months to 2 years, we've appreciated the care and concern Mr. Kaiser and Niagara Innovative Living have shown for the well-being of our congregation and community. They have listened to our concerns, answered our questions, and provided workable solutions to help ensure the long-term viability and sustainability of our church. The newly designed parking lot, which Niagara Innovative Living will build for our church on the southwest corner, will significantly improve our look, value, and accessibility. We appreciate the spirit of honesty, transparency, and collaboration demonstrated in their relationship with our congregation, and we look forward to seeing the benefits this new project might bring to our neighborhood. Those are thus far some comments on behalf of our church. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave and Stephen. As Stephen indicated, my name is William Haiku. I'm a planner with Upper Canada Consultants and am representing the applicant, developer, and owner for this evening's meeting. I will be presenting the development proposal in the following presentation. However, before jumping into the details, I feel it is important to set the current planning context for the province, the region, and the town. Provincially, the planning context has changed significantly over the last 15 to 20 years since the introduction of the provincial policy statement Greenbelt and Growth Plan in the mid-early 2000s. More recently, the provincial government has changed things again with Bill 23 due to escalating real estate prices and escalating costs of construction. These provincial policy documents have mandated a shift to a different form of development in order to preserve sensitive agricultural and environmental areas outside of the urban boundary and reduce pressure on the expansion of the urban boundary further. The way to do this is done through the encouragement of growth through intensification and infilling in existing urban areas. These changes and the policy direction are meant to provide for long-term sustainability and well-being of the municipality. The path to this is through intensification and the provision of different forms of housing to appropriately accommodate the large growth influx over the next generation. This requirement for different housing opportunities and forms results in an efficient use of land and municipal services within the urban boundary and will help support the existing tax base. Overall, these provincial documents establish a mandate of growth and the creation of new dwelling units within the Niagara region, and more specifically, the town of Pelham, who will each need to do their part to meet these population targets. Sure, you have noticed in the news, and due to the significant rise in costs, there's an imminent need to provide housing of all dwelling types and sizes. The province is now targeting the creation of 1.5 new dwelling units within the next 10 years. Of course, this is Ontario-wide. Within the policy context of the PPS and the growth plan, they direct municipalities and developers to change from a low density, single attached dwelling housing format to a medium and higher density format in order to achieve the housing needs. We'll now look at some regional planning context. Regionally, a long forthcoming policy exercise resulted in a new Niagara Region official plan, which was passed in late 2022. Within it, there is a region-wide target that 60% of all new dwellings be within the built-up urban area, meaning all municipalities in the region are dealing with significant growth pressures. Along with the new official plan, there are population projections that would see the Niagara Region population increase from approximately 490,000 to 674,000 by 2051. This is approximately 180,000 people region-wide. At a population of just under 3 people per dwelling unit, it means approximately 66,000 new dwelling units, of course, region-wide. Generally speaking, growth is accommodated in 3 ways. First, there's development through secondary plan greenfield areas within the existing urban boundary. An example of this would be the East Fonthill secondary plan area. Secondly, the new regional official plan provides for an urban boundary expansion area between Clare Ave and Pelham Street, south of Quaker Road, directly adjacent to the Welland border. Thirdly, there has been assigned a 25% intensification rate for infilling on underutilized sites within the built boundary, which is where this site is located. This intensification rate was endorsed by the previous council in a report this past summer in 2022. Pelham ultimately is to utilize all 3 of these options in order to meet the growth requirements moving forward. And I will note, this 25% intensification rate is something that we'll come back to in the next slide. But overall, the regional official plan provides direction on how to achieve the intensification rate. This is through promoting compact built form, for example, higher density buildings. That is to additionally promote a mix of land uses, creating complete and walkable communities, and through supporting a range and mix of housing types and sizes. Now let's look at the town's planning context. As previously noted, the previous council endorsed the 25% intensification rate. But what does this actually mean? What are the numbers? So as it relates to some of the metrics, it means that the Pelham's population will increase to roughly 28,000 in the next 30 years by 2051. That is about 8,000 people, just under half its existing size, and about 1/3 of its projected size. That population translates to an increase of approximately 1,000 dwelling units within the existing urban areas. This means that about 1,000 units must be built within the town as you know it today. This will certainly be a challenge to the existing urban fabric and a change to the town's built form as it currently exists. Specific to the town of Pelham, the official plan is the guiding document when assessing land use and development, and it provides direction on where to do this under the policies that Shannon specified. And I've got them here again, but that is to make use of underutilized space where infrastructure and services are available. And they're to be done in a context-sensitive manner in appropriate locations. Those attributes include near arterial and collector roads, nearby a mix of land uses to support the density and walkable communities, in locations that respect the height and massing and have proper space and separation to create a compatible interface with the surrounding properties, and to do so in a manner that does not create traffic issues, incorporates parking, landscape, and buffering, as well as amenity and recreational facilities. The implementation component of the official plan is the town's zoning bylaw. As you are aware, the town made significant updates to the zoning through its new comprehensive zoning bylaw just last year. The previous bylaw was from 1987. This new bylaw and the standards therein were approved by council, and even though it is under appeal and not in force and effect, it is something that we will be referring to through this presentation as a baseline for what council has approved in the past. The relationship between these two town documents as a point of reference is very important when assessing the development proposal. Now, to get into the details. As indicated, the subject lands are municipally known as 105 Welland Road. They are about 2 acres in size and are located at the corner of Pelham Street, an arterial road, and Welland Road, a collector road. This area is the main south intersection of Fonthill and the main gateway into Fonthill from Welland. As noted, the lands are currently used by the Concordia Lutheran Church. The development lands are a 1 acre parcel on the west side of the property, as delineated by the dashed yellow line. The existing church is to be retained and to continue operations on the east side of the property. Contextually, to the north, we have residential single detached dwellings. To the west are residential street townhouse dwellings. To the east is Pelham Street with residential single detached dwellings beyond that. To the south, we have residential townhouses and a commercial property that includes a gas station, convenience store, as well as several other medical commercial uses, including pharmacy, clinic, and physiotherapy. In addition, the property is part of the existing pedestrian network. The existing sidewalk along the property frontage is part of Circle Loop 5 of the Steve Bauer Trail Network. For many years, properties at this intersection were vacant, and as evident by some of the other development, this area is underutilized and transitioning as it moves forward into the future. So on behalf of the prospective owner, Niagara Innovative Living, as indicated, a zoning bylaw amendment application and consent application has been filed to develop the subject lands with a 6-story, 48 residential apartment condo building. The makeup of the building would include 1 level of underground parking, 1 level of surface parking in the first floor garage. This gives each unit an indoor covered parking space. The top 5 stories, floors 2 through 6, would be proposed to be the 48 residential dwelling units. And this includes a 6th floor amenity room for the whole building at the front of the building. And then in addition to that, each unit would have a balcony space. In order to permit this development, a change in the zoning is required on the westerly half of the property to residential multiple 2 or RM2 shown in brown with various site-specific provisions outlined by Shannon. Whereas the rest of the property would continue to be institutional in blue. And it is proposed that the new institutional zoning be put on part 1 where the existing church is. I'll provide an overview of the proposed development plan. As previously indicated, the subject lands are to be severed in 2, shown by the yellow dashed line, with the existing church retaining the easterly portion of the property. That will include a new driveway opposite the existing Circle K entrance. This will service the existing church facility. Modifications contain a new drop-off area, including new stairs and ramp to the front door. A new parking area is proposed, including 38 parking spaces on the east side of the site with new landscape buffering to buffer the parking area from the street. The westerly side of the site would contain the proposed 6-story building. The building is sited at the southeast corner of the site, or is far away from the existing dwellings, and is located at the front of the property. This will help to enhance the existing streetscape. The building is to be serviced through an updated driveway access, so the same location of the existing church driveway. And the building entry is focused on at the front of the site. Opposite of it are 2 accessible parking spaces with 1 visitor parking space and a drop-off lay-by area near the front door. The driveway then continues alongside of the building and then ends at 8 visitor parking spaces to the rear with the 2 entries to the internal parking spaces. This entire rear area will contain fencing and new coniferous landscaping in order to provide year-round buffering. The existing coniferous tree grouping shown on the left-hand or west side is proposed to be preserved, ensuring long-term amenity areas are provided. We'll now pass things off to the project architect, Emilio Raimondo, who will briefly discuss the proposed building designs. Emilio?
Good evening. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Emilio, Mr. Mayor, members of council, town staff. My name is Emilio Raimondo of Raimondo Associate Architects in Niagara Falls. Raimondo Associate Architects have been around. This is our 31st year in practice. We certainly pride ourselves on appropriate and good design. Some recent notable projects we've completed in the town of Pelham include St. Alexander's Parish Church, Wellsprings, Niagara, and we're currently working on Fonthill Abbey for Rinaldi Homes. Some recent similar projects in terms of residential developments we've completed over the last few years, 2 of which are current for Niagara Innovative Living include the Scott Street Condominium in St. Catharines, Mapleview Condominium in Welland, not far from this site, the Royal Port in Port Dalhousie for Mr. Rankin, the Southport Condominium for Mr. Rankin, the Wellington apartment condo in St. Catharines for Pantera Group, and most recently the Elements on Lakeport Road in St. Catharines for Mountain View. Niagara Innovative Living has provided innovative building designs for a number of recent apartment condominium projects. Their primary motivation is to make available a form of attainable housing that provides comfort, security, durability, and energy efficiencies for its residents. They have mastered the insulated concrete form known as the ICF system and Hambro concrete floor system as their preferred method of construction. This building will be built on that basis. The purpose of this system is that it meets and exceeds all of their above parameters, which is very important to them from a qualitative perspective. Given the use of these systems, the building articulates itself as a 6-story structure, stepping down to 4 stories along Welland Road by using a combination of masonry and stone brick veneer, horizontal wood grain appearing siding, both in various colors, recessed covered balconies and glass guards as amenity space, marquee entrance feature, covered entrance lay-by area for parking drop-off and resident drop-off. And in overall, we are looking for a warmer color palette that is indicative of the surrounding context and the neighboring site feature. The building orientation, as William had pointed out, is oriented towards Welland Road, whereby it engages the public realm, something that is more desirable in terms of planning principles today. Next slide, please. As William noted, parking access is via the rear of the building. So we've tried to minimize the amount of parking that's actually surface parking. William noted that there's some additional barrier-free spaces and guest parking nearby the main entrance. So these two particular plans indicate how the parking is laid out. The parking is arranged below the building at grade. So the first level at grade is below grade parking with 5 additional floors of residential suites. Then there is 1 lower level of parking, which we call below ground parking. In both instances, the notion here is to provide convenient secure parking for the residences of this development. Furthermore, by internalizing parking and reducing the amount of surface parking, it has a great effect on the reduction of noise that may be generated by parking or people coming and going and visitors, etc. Next slide, please. As you can see with these particular plans, these are, they indicate the diversity of unit types. The whole notion of attainable housing is to provide a diversity of units that make the units more marketable to a more diverse demographic. A diversity of unit types and sizes and area make the housing variety more attainable. Each unit is serviced by a form of exterior amenity space via covered balconies. The units facing Welland Road are arranged with greater privacy in a step configuration to bolster greater amenity, balcony terrace spaces, and the view down to the street. Next slide, please. William?
Sorry, Emilio, I seem to be missing a slide there. Are you able to proceed?
Sure. You could, was there a slide missing there?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay. There was one other view that we had noted on the rear of the building, and basically the view along the rear and parking axis, which would be sort of the north and west views of the building, demonstrate the notion of continuity of finishes along the four building elevations. So in some developments, you'll see developers that will put all of the, call it a material palette on the facing facades that are more visible to the public, and downplay the less visible facades. Niagara Innovative Living has had the tradition of making sure that their designs are congruous and continuous, so there's continuity in material selection. So stone, brick veneer, horizontal siding will be articulated in a scale along the entire facades of the building. William, you can take it. Thank you. And I'll be certainly open to any questions that staff or counselors may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Emilio. Here's an overview of the proposed site plan drawing. As noted, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to address the old zoning bylaw, the 1987 bylaw, which sees quite a few changes to the various zoning provisions. However, I wanted to point out under the new zoning bylaw, site-specific relief for the building location would only be required for the highlighted setbacks on the interior side yard, as well as the building height and some of the parking stall requirements. Under the new zoning bylaw, the westerly and northerly side yard setbacks adjacent to the existing dwellings are met. As well, the new zoning bylaw requires for 1.25 parking spaces, which is also proposed here. Unfortunately, the appeal of the new zoning bylaw has resulted in more relief being requested as opposed to what we would be looking for under the new bylaw. However, a number of reports and studies have been completed for the project. A transportation impact study has been prepared confirming that the existing roadway has capacity to accommodate the proposal, that the existing traffic light at the Pelham and Welland Road intersection needs no improvements, and that the proposed driveway access is result in no queuing issues and do not conflict or create unsafe traffic turning movements. Functional servicing and stormwater management report was prepared that confirms municipal water and sanitary sewer capacity are available to support the development. Stormwater flows will be controlled to the pre-development level and be treated for quality controls on site for outletting to the existing storm sewer on Welland Road. A noise feasibility study was also completed. No concerns were noted. However, building materials are to be confirmed at the detailed design stage. The report also notes that HVAC equipment is to be positioned appropriately away from existing residences and that the proposed garage doors are to be insulated aluminum with motor dampeners. A geotechnical study was completed indicating the existing ground is suitable for a typical spread footing foundation. The footing design is to be confirmed by a structural engineer at the detailed design stage. An environmental site assessment was completed that confirms the site is clean for the proposed residential uses. Additionally, an archaeological assessment was completed and confirms the site is void of historical artifacts. However, we are currently waiting on the ministry's clearance letter for that assessment. A neighborhood information meeting was held on October 26, 2022 at the church. Attendees included myself, the project architect, owners, and the applicants. The open house was held in open session, display boards, and opportunities for individual conversations with the team. Roughly 20 to 25 people attended the meeting. Copies of the meeting notes and sign-in sheets have been provided to town staff for the review and file. The comments were directed to a range of different topics, but predominantly focused on the height and the fit in the existing neighborhood. And that's what we refer to as compatibility in the planning world. So considering the amount of feedback this proposal has to date, this is something that we will focus on a little more heavily throughout the rest of the presentation. So just to circle back to the town's official plan, and the two main themes or considerations for infilling and intensification are generally compatibility, that height to setback relationship, and the appropriateness of that location. So first off, that compatibility, the height, bulk, and massing of the existing building. This is commonly assessed through a planning tool called an angular plane analysis. This tool is also used by staff and council through the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. And then the second is the appropriateness of location. As noted earlier, the subject site is located at the main Pelham Street and Welland Road intersection, the main gateway into the south end of Fonthill. Generally, intensification proposals are to be focused on those higher order roads. Additionally, this is nearby a mix of land uses. The proposed site and buildings adjacent to the new commercial gas station, including a variety store, pharmacy, medical clinic, and physiotherapy clinic. Considering these details, we feel that this property is an appropriate location. Considering how underdeveloped the property is, it's actually one of very few sites that present a development opportunity for compatible development within the built boundary. So in the following slides, we will look at that compatibility further and review several angular plane analysis to understand this further. But before I do so, I would like to clarify what an angular plane is and how it works. An angular plane analysis is a well-recognized tool to determine the appropriate placement and setback for higher density intensification proposals. Typically, a 45-degree angular plane is used, and that really is a 1-to-1 ratio of building height to building setback. So for example, every additional meter of building height would result in an additional meter of setback. So 1 meter extra of building height would result in 1 extra meter of building setback. Here you can see the angular plane for the proposed side yard setback of the building on the west side of the site. So this is interfacing with the rear yard of the street townhouse dwellings on Hunter's Court. The roof height as defined in the zoning bylaw is proposed to be at 19.61 meters, whereas the main sidewall setback of the building is at 20.73 meters. That meets the 45-degree angular plane or the 1-to-1 height to setback ratio. I will note that there is a proposed architectural bump out from that main wall to accommodate a stair. This portion of the building is set back at 19.21 meters, just shy of that 45 degrees, but this is a very small portion of the building as a stair. This image also gives a good indication of the existing coniferous trees, which are proposed to be retained and will aid in buffering from the existing rear yards to the proposed building. Here you can see the angular plane proposed for the rear yard setback on the buildings on the north side, interfacing with the existing single detached dwellings on Woodside Square. Again, the roof deck is proposed at 19.61 meters, whereas the rear wall setback is at 20.21 meters, which meets the 1-to-1 ratio or the 45-degree angular plane. Again, I will note there's a small architectural fin detail which projects above the 19.61 meters in height. But overall, the proposed setbacks to the side lot line and the rear lot line meet the 45-degree angular plane setback, and those are all shown by that red dashed line. The actual visual impact is a little bit lower as people obviously aren't at the top roof line. One of the important contextual details to keep in mind when reviewing the angular plane is the new zoning bylaw, which we will now focus on a little closer. As you can see here, the subject site was identified as institutional in the new zoning bylaw. Specific to the new institutional zone, residential apartment buildings or condos are permitted at a height of 15 meters with all updated setbacks. Generally speaking, a floor is about 3.0 meters in height or just above that. So ultimately, this 15 meters in height could accommodate a short 5-story building or a tall 4-story building. So I'll now go through the following slides containing some comparisons that depict what would be permitted under the new zoning bylaw that has already been approved by council. So now looking at the new institutional zone and how a building would be positioned, here you can see a side yard comparison to Hunter's Court or the rear yards on Hunter's Court. You can see in the black outline the hatch of a building that would be permitted under the setbacks at 6 meters and the height of 15 meters. You can see that these zoning setbacks do not meet the 45-degree angular plane that we are proposing for the 6-story building. While the new institutional zone is lower in height, it can actually be located much closer to the side property line and ultimately results in a less compatible and more intrusive position to the surrounding neighbors. Here we are looking at the rear yard comparison. And again, in black, you can see the hatch of a building that would be permitted in that new institutional zone. This is the rear yard setback backing onto Woodside Square. You can see that the building would be set back 12 meters and at a height of 15 meters, again, does not meet that 45-degree angular plane. Again, while it is lower in height, it can be located much closer to the rear property line and ultimately is less compatible to the surrounding neighbors. We'll now look at one of the other major considerations for this proposal, and I'd like to talk about and review the new downtown corridor zone throughout Fonthill. You can see these zones depicted in blue. The downtown corridor zone permits apartment buildings at 6 stories or 20 meters in height as of right. The downtown corridor zone includes setbacks based on angular planes. We are looking at this because it's already approved and provides a threshold or reference point for what is compatible and what has been approved previously through the comprehensive zoning. This will indicate an appropriate height to setback ratio or requirement for higher density buildings when they're adjacent to lower density neighborhoods. In the following slides, we will look at a comparison with 202 Highway 20, known as the Timsdale site at the south end of Lookout Street, which you can see here. The property boundary is outlined in green. And now we will review some of the various setbacks from the new zones. The orange line depicts the new institutional zone. The red line depicts the new downtown corridor zone, whereas the blue line shows the proposed zoning provisions for the 105 Welland Road property that is before you tonight. In all instances, the proposed zoning for the 105 Welland Road is the same or further from the existing rear yards of the dwellings, both on Timsdale Crescent and Brondes Lane. While 105 Welland Road is not located on Highway 20, similar compatibility considerations are relevant to the subject site, as the interaction between the rear yard of low-density dwellings, single attached dwellings, and apartment buildings can be assessed. So to illustrate those same setbacks on the 105 Welland Road, again, you can see the property boundary outlined in green, the new institutional zoning in orange, the new downtown corridor zoning in red, and the proposed zoning in front of you tonight in blue. Again, in all instances, the proposed zoning for 105 Welland Road before you tonight is just as far, if not further, from the rear yard of the dwellings on Hunter's Court and Woodside Square. Flipping back to the 202 Highway 20 or Timsdale site and looking at the existing Lookout Village property, on the image on the left-hand side, you can see the existing 5-story building is located approximately 10.5 meters from the rear yard of the single detached dwelling on Brondes Lane. On the right-hand image, you can see the view of the building from the cul-de-sac on Brondes Lane. The next two slides will assess the angular planes for this same 202 Highway or Timsdale site further. This image shows the permitted side yard setback under the downtown corridor zoning, which will require a 60, not a 45, a 60-degree angular plane from the rear yard setback on the side yard setback on the Timsdale Crescent properties. This is shown in red, while the side yard setback proposed for the 105 Welland Road is shown in blue. It's a significant difference and evidently much farther away. This image shows the rear yard setback of the downtown corridor zone, which requires the 45-degree angular plane to the rear property of the dwellings on Brondes Lane. This is shown in red. The blue shows the 105 Welland Road proposal, which also proposes a 45-degree angular plane. The setback distance is the same at 20 meters. The reason why I've gone through all these details and comparisons tonight is we wanted to demonstrate that the proposal before you tonight for 105 Welland Road meets or exceeds the setback requirements of the new comprehensive zoning bylaw zones. What we were asking for is not creating a situation unlike any other that currently exists in the town or will be developed as of right without further council approval. As indicated, the new comprehensive zoning bylaw set a bar or threshold for the relationship between building height and building setback. The zoning bylaw, as the right arm of the town's official plan, is ultimately reflective of the town's policy and vision moving forward. The proposal before you tonight meets or exceeds the development standards of the new bylaw and therefore meets the town's official plan policies. I'll now pass things over to Greg from Niagara Innovative Living to provide some background on Niagara Innovative Living. Greg?
Thank you, William. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. So my name is Greg Tremere. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Niagara Innovative Living, and I've been involved with the company for the last 9 years. Niagara Innovative Living is owned by individuals that live and work in the Niagara region, and we take pride in the communities that we build. Niagara Innovative Living uses the best local trades from start to finish in every aspect of construction, planning, and management, providing the purchaser a product they will love and enjoy for years to come. We've done several projects already throughout the Niagara region. Our first project was a 39-unit condominium in Niagara Falls. We then completed a 44-unit condominium in St. Catharines. After that, we did a 27-unit condominium in St. Catharines, and most recently, we completed a 33-unit condominium in Welland, which is on South Pelham Road, just down from the proposed site. We are currently building a 41-unit condominium in St. Catharines. Construction has started, and we are planning on opening the sales center in 2023. Oops, just 1 second. Notes here. So the proposed project, why 48 units? The viability of the project is predicated on achieving 48 units. And then the 6 stories is predicated on the allowable land available to construct the 48 units. So high fixed costs involved in constructing a condominium building require the builder developer to balance the economies of scale with the appropriate number of units and to allow for the units to be attainable. The 48 units are directly in line with the town's intensification targets, as well as the targets set out by the province and the region. The financial impact for the project is significant. The project will create an estimated $24 million in new assessment fees for the region of Niagara and the town of Pelham. This equates to an estimated $327,000 of new tax dollars, with an estimated $113,000 of that going to the town of Pelham on an annual basis. The project will contribute an estimated $100,000 to the town of Pelham in parkland dedication, and the project will pay an estimated $1.5 million in development charges, with $711,000 of that being the town of Pelham's portion. As well, the project will pay approximately $73,000 in building permit fees, along with a host of other fees to the town. So the building being proposed would be a valuable asset to the town of Pelham and create an exciting project and housing option for the town of Pelham. Thank you. William, back to you.
Thanks, Greg. We'll now briefly look at the next steps. Shannon's outlined these as well, but following the meeting, we'll take back all public, agency, council comments. We'll review the plan and application further with the development team and have further discussions with staff. As Shannon indicated, a recommendation will be brought forward by staff at a future date. Again, should the zoning be approved, a further site plan approval and severance process, including an update to the church parking lot, would be required. But overall, the application as proposed seeks to implement a much needed residential apartment dwelling within the South Fonthill area and will help the town of Pelham meet its intensification goals. The organization of the development proposal has been done in a manner to locate it in an appropriate location, achieving a compatible interface with the existing neighborhood. I'll now pass things back over to Stephen Kaiser for some concluding remarks, following which myself and the team are available for any questions from the public or from council. But I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity this evening. Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, William. Just some final remarks. I hope that our presentation, as I mentioned earlier, addressed a number of the concerns that have been mentioned and given a much better understanding and perspective of our development that we are proposing. Change is never easy. I've witnessed this process throughout my time in this industry, going back as far as 1986, when our company proposed creating 2 lots on Emmett Street through severance. The town council chamber was packed with opposition. The severances were ultimately approved, and today one would be hard-pressed to point out the 2 homes that our company constructed on the lots that were created. So many developments in our town have been opposed for what one may term not in my backyard. And ultimately, they have been built and fit in the urban fabric of our town. Hunter's Court is just one example. Those who seek to preserve the small town feel must realize that our small town has been constantly changing and evolving. In not that many years, as was pointed out, our town will be home to almost 30,000 people. I can tell you that the town I knew 60 years ago as a boy is so much different than the town we all call home today. The town has continued to evolve over the years and will continue to change as we move forward. The small town feel may be changed or lost in terms of the built form. However, as pointed out to me, in spirit, we are still a small town through a host of community initiatives that we all enjoy. I won't restate some of the numbers that Mr. Hycup used in his presentation. However, I will say that the initiatives at the province in terms of the growth impact us all and are definitely linked to what we are discussing this evening. If the town is to meet its intensification targets inside the built boundary, there are only so many properties like this one we are discussing this evening that can achieve this kind of density. As noted, the town has a new comprehensive zoning bylaw, and I commend the Director of Planning and her staff, along with the previous council, for this initiative. The bylaw sets a new direction for the town in terms of urban form. Although the bylaw, as noted, is currently under appeal by a party on a specific unrelated section, once the new comprehensive zoning bylaw comes into effect, there will be new permitted uses and enabling parameters on a host of properties throughout the town, including this site. As noted, this subject property, a building of 15 meters in height, will be permitted, with much smaller setbacks than we are proposing. That would allow, as William said, a 5-story building or 3 meters per floor. If in fact we had the same designation as the Timsdale property on Highway 20, and we believe the two sites are similar in a host of ways, we would only be before the Committee of Adjustment for a few minor variances. Mr. Mayor, members of council and planning staff, I do not envy your position. The new legislation and the planning direction set by the province, adopted by the region, inevitably plays out right here in our backyard. This is truly where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. There are new tools and mechanisms being implemented by all levels of government to enable more residential construction across the province. This is truly a watershed moment for housing in Ontario. As you know, in the spectrum of ownership housing choices, a mid-rise building such as this provides, in most cases, the best opportunity to own attainable housing in a community. Interestingly enough, the last building built within the built boundary of our town was constructed by Lester Schultz in 1976, some 47 years ago. That 5-story building complex of residential condominiums is the building next to the Timsdale site on Highway 20, referred to in William's presentation. In conclusion, I'd like to state a few facts. This project, as Mr. Braun earlier stated, is directly linked to the long-term viability and sustainability of Concordia Lutheran Church. Churches play an important role in the fabric of our community. This development will create over $24 million of new assessment in the town without a new road for the town to plow and maintain, and without a single length of pipe for the town to eventually repair and replace. This development fits into the planning context set up by the province along with the region of Niagara, and fits within the town's parameters of the official plan and the direction of the town's new comprehensive zoning bylaw. Currently in the town, 6-story buildings are permitted on a number of individual properties, and that number will grow substantially once the comprehensive zoning bylaw comes into effect. Niagara Innovative Living, represented by Mr. Tremere, has a proven track record of building similar state-of-the-art buildings here in our region, creating jobs and for trades and suppliers here in Niagara. This proposed building is designed by an award-winning local architectural firm with experience in a host of building types. The architecture and attention to detail presented by Mr. Raimondo tonight speaks for itself. The development will provide 48 homes. Could be a home for a young couple, a home for a single parent, a home for a local professional person, or a home for empty nesters currently living in our town who wants a new lifestyle. And finally, I'm proud of the work we've done as a team to bring this development proposal to the point it is in process. I look forward to hearing the comments from the town, the area residents, and working to make this vision a reality. Thank you, and back to William.
Yeah, so that's it for the presentation. Again, we're happy to answer any questions council may have on the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that in-depth presentation by Mr. Haycoop and the rest of the team. Before we get to the speakers, which is what this night is all about, we are going to call a 5-minute break. We will be back. Councilors, please be back within that 5 minutes, and then we will listen and hear the remarks of the residents that are on tap to speak. Thank you, and we'll be back in 5. Thanks.
Hey, how are you? You there? Right.
Madam Clerk, I believe we have all of our counselors back. I turn the meeting to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you noted, that does bring us to the public portion of the meeting. We do have numerous public speakers with us this evening, so I'd ask Ms. Wilford to please bring in Mr. Whitelaw, our first speaker.
Thank you very much, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, and you have the floor.
Okay, Sarah, I don't see an ability to share my screen. Do you?
Okay, not a problem. We can have Ms. Wilford share your presentation for you.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, and if I may, Mr. Whitelaw, just a reminder to you and all of our presenters tonight that this is a public meeting for input only, and obviously there will be no decision made on this application tonight. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, and esteemed members of Pelham Council. My name is Brad Whitelaw, and I'm here to speak on behalf of a number of concerned neighborhood residents of the proposed 6-story residential development to be for 105 Welland Road. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. Over these next few slides, what we'd like to do is to identify for members of council, staff, and the developers there, a number of the concerns that were identified to me with regards to the proposed development itself. These are, again, in no particular order. These are the main concerns that were raised. The first concern that we talked about and was already identified earlier was the proposed height and the neighborhood fit of the building. As we know, they're looking at building a 6-story plus 1 level of underground parking for 48 residential units. As we said, there are no buildings of this height or design located anywhere in this particular area of Font Hill currently. And this is contrary to what the consultant's planning justification report, or PJ report, as I'll refer to it in future, saying that this building is not compatible with surrounding properties which have been here for over 30 years. And on the section right in the bottom left, you'll see the segment that I pulled that report from. So when you're looking at a 6-story building there, and you're talking properties around here, all the properties, as we know, are basically 2-story or 3-story maximum in this area, which this building is not a fit. Next slide, please. The next concern that was identified by residents was the increased traffic volume accessing Welland Road. Residents and service vehicles would be required to access and leave the property via Welland Road. The sight line to the west of this property, while exiting the development, is significantly affected by a curve in the road to the north, so just past Hunter's Court and McHale on the other side, making it very unsafe. It's also very close to becoming a blind spot at this point for that exit. The developer's also looking at proposing to put a new entrance for the church parking lot that would be constructed on Welland Road as well, across from the Circle K entrance on the east portion of the proposed development. There's a safety concern already for residents and neighbors utilizing Welland Road due to the increased volume and traffic. This again would be further exacerbated by the development of the proposed development. You're looking at right now, you would have entrances coming off the church, the existing Circle K, the proposed development, the residential townhouses across that, Michaela, Hunter's Court, down Woodside Square. So all of those just within that core block there are accessing Welland Road. Next slide. Okay, let me back one more. Okay, I don't think you have the same presentation that I have. Okay, I'll just speak with the one that I have here. Again, with regards to the increased traffic use there, neither the consultant nor the town had provided us with the traffic impact study for our further review until January the 11th. As a result, we'll have to provide our follow-up comments as part of the town's report to council with regards to the justification for the project itself. However, in the planning justification report at that time, it had stated that it will not cause or create traffic hazards or an unacceptable level of congestion on surrounding roads. As residents living in this area, we can confirm that the Welland Road is already very busy and is a safety hazard without any new developments being constructed on that property. Next slide. Okay. The third concern that was identified by residents in this neighborhood was the increased demand on the town's existing infrastructure for water and sewage. The consultant's functional servicing report for the proposed development had states that existing infrastructure is sufficient capacity and there's no need for the town to do any upgrades and services to accommodate it. The water and sewage infrastructure in this area is older and is not designed to accommodate the increased demand from a proposed development of this such, as well as any future residential developments to be built across the road, which will further exacerbate these problems. Neighborhood residents have reported experiencing reduced water pressure and are concerned about the potential for sewage flooding backups into their house if this development is constructed. Next slide. There's concerns from residents with regards to the encroachment on neighborhood properties. We had seen the diagram there about how the site's angular is proposed for it, but the proposed development itself will encroach on neighborhood properties and their owners' quality of life. Sight lines of neighboring properties will be obstructed by the building and any canopy trees that are planted in front of the rear parking lot that they're proposing, which is highlighted around in red. Neighbors have enjoyed watching the sun and the moon rise, as well as their privacy. This enjoyment will be gone. They will now have to worry about people staring down at them from 6 stories above. Regardless of the angular there, these properties are still going to be looking straight on into residential properties. Next slide. The fifth concern that was identified by residents is the increase in noise and light pollution. There is an increase in noise and light pollution that would be generated not only during the construction period, which we understand from the consultant is going to be at least 2 years, but from residents living there afterwards. Neither the consultant nor the town had provided us with a noise and vibration study for our review until January the 11th. As a result, we'll have to provide follow-up comments with regards to that study in there. But there was a couple items that we did identify already at this point in time. In the report itself, it says that sound level predictions indicate that future traffic sound levels will exceed the MECP guidelines at the proposed building. There was a flag that was already in their report itself, as well as in the site description, it says the site is currently occupied by a church which will be demolished. We've understood from the consultant that that church will not be demolished, so we have concerns about why that would be flagged in that report to begin with. Next slide. The next concern that was identified by residents is the negative impact on the resale value of their properties. The proposed development would severely impact neighborhood property resale values. Some residents are already trying to sell their properties in anticipation of it being built. This is what they've told us when we did our survey. Residents, they feel, may not be able to even sell their properties once the 6-story multi-residential property is built behind them or in their area. Looking at residential properties in the Niagara region, we already, and I'm sure everybody's well aware of, the prices have started going down drastically. A lot of that due to the interest rates, we understand, but when a development like this comes in, we've talked to a number of real estate agents who have indicated that your property values will go down once that's built. So residents have a serious concern with that. Next slide. The next concern that was raised by residents was regards to potential overflow of visitor parking on the neighborhood streets. As the consultant had identified, the existing plan calls for 11 visitor parking spaces and several access parking spaces. With 48 residential units, this could lead to the potential for an overflow of visitor parking by these residents on either Hunter's Court or Michaela Crescent. Both of these streets do not have adequate parking as it is. So there's concern that was raised by residents living on both streets there with regards to additional parking being taken up by these visitors of this development. Next slide. The next concern that was raised with regards to the development was the proposed canopy trees to be planted both in the front and the rear of the parking lot and existing trees. The development plan calls for several large canopy trees to be planted between the 6-foot privacy fence on the west side and the rear visitor parking lot that they've proposed. Canopy trees will take years to mature and provide any sort of privacy and buffer from noise and light. The driveway and parking lot is 3 meters from the existing fence and backyards, which is overly intrusive. Existing tree lines, both on the west and the north side, are located 5 meters beyond the proposed driveway. There's construction on the driveway, and the garage entrance will eliminate these existing trees on the west and north side, which took many years to grow, some ways upwards of 80 years. These are coniferous trees. They're very shallow roots, and having any sort of damage coming that from the construction of the driveway as well as the proposed development will kill them. We had an arborist come out and take a look at that and looked at those properties and confirmed that those types of trees, he said, would not survive this development. As well as the church itself, the existing trees at the southeast corner of the church property. The development plan calls for the removal of between 20 and 26 fully mature trees on the southeast corner of the church property in order to accommodate a new church parking lot. This will have significant environmental impacts. Any new trees that may be planted as part of the redevelopment of the parking lot there will take years to mature. Next slide. Other concerns were raised were the potential stability issues of the existing soil. Although the consultant has said that they've done a study on that, the land which this 6-story multi-residential building and underground parking is to be constructed on is located on a former swamp. Anybody that's lived in this area would know that. Neighbors are concerned with the stability of this ground, which may cause issues from a building this size as well as to the surrounding residential properties themselves. Neither the consultant nor the town had provided us with their soil report for our comment until January the 11th. As a result, we'll be providing our follow-up comments with regards to that study as part of the town's follow-up report to council. Next slide. The 10th concern that was raised by residents, specifically in the neighboring properties of this development, is the potential structural damage to their neighborhood properties during construction. There is the potential for structural damage such as cracked foundation, walls, etc., to neighborhood properties during the construction of this type of a development. Neighbors would like assurances from the consultant, the developer, that any structural damages to their properties as a direct result of this construction will be fixed by the contractor within 6 weeks of being notified by the resident to the resident's satisfaction and at the contractor's direct expense. Next slide. As you were, We did a survey of neighborhood residents. We both did it online for the benefit of those that utilize online petitions, as well as we did a survey using the regions or the town's format for surveys there. At the time of doing the change online posted was to support the rejection of the zoning bylaw that would address this and allow this proposed development. To date, we're over 635 signatures now. This is an out-of-date presentation, I apologize. And it continues to grow every day. As you can see, even when we sent that in, that was 500, it's now 635. In addition, we did a door-to-door petition of residents that lived several blocks around the petition or the proposed development. Residents were asked if they were opposed to the zoning bylaw amendment and the proposed development. To date, 510 residents signed this petition supporting for the rejection of the zoning bylaw amendment, which you've received as part of your package. And this continues to grow each day. We're still out there canvassing for those residents there. So between that, we have over 1,000 either online or in handwritten notices from residents that say that they do not support this development in this area here. Next slide. Okay, there's a slide unfortunately that's missing here. What I did want to identify to members of council here is the differences between the proposed developments that were discussed most recently at town council with regards to 1145 Pelham Street and 105 Welland Road. With 1145 Pelham Street development, the developer's looking at a 5-story high, which includes a rooftop indoor-outdoor amenity space on an HVAC on the 5th floor. This development here, as we know, is 6 stories high, as well as 1 level of underground parking. So you're already talking a difference in height. With 1145 Pelham, it was previously zoned as general commercial 89 prior to the recent rezoning application for residential multi 2. This is currently zoned as institutional. Of 1145 Pelham Street there we go. The parking lot exists between, there's a parking lot that exists between the east side residents on Tanner Drive, as well as on South Street on the residential property there. This here essentially encroaches right against the residents that live on Hunters Court and Woodside Square property lines. In addition, no existing trees would need to be cut down on 1145 Pelham Street. There's a serious concern with residents here at 105 development there that major tree lines will need to be cut down along the west, east, and north sides of this property in order to accommodate this development. With 1145 Pelham Street, it exits onto Pelham Street, which is more than adequate there for that. This here will be exiting, as we know, onto Welland Road at an intersection which already has significant traffic issues. And finally, with 1145 Pelham Street development, there's very little shadow impact on all residential properties surrounding it throughout the year. With 105's development there are major shadow impacts on the west and north side residential properties throughout the year. Next slide. As councillors are well aware of, and as the consultant has identified, residents here are also aware of the provincial policy statement, both that and Bill 23's recent document here. Section 104 or 1.4 of the policy statement requires that municipalities and planning authorities permit and facilitate a range of mixed housing options. We understand that. But this is to be achieved through establishing targets for affordable and low and moderately priced homes. This proposed development does not meet this criteria. Under Bill 23, it states that the creation of a residential unit that is intended to be an affordable residential unit for a period of 25 years or more from the time that this unit is first resident. The consultant stated at the open house that we had there that the average selling price of this is going to be around $900,000 plus condo fees. That's not affordable housing for Font Hill or anywhere in Pelham. We're comforted to know that the developer is going to be paying the development charges as well. Pelham taxpayers would not be happy if they had to subsidize this if it went under Bill 23 and said that this is affordable housing. And next slide. We have recommendations that we would like council to consider as well as town staff when they're developing the report. Ours, first and foremost, is to outright reject this zoning bylaw amendment for this proposed development to preserve the character of this residential neighborhood. We don't have this type of development in this area. That council recognizes that that the neighborhood residents are opposed to a redevelopment of this property with a 6-story, 48-unit apartment building. This construction of this property would adversely impact the character of the neighborhood through over-intensification. That council maintain the 2- or 3-story structure limit in keeping with the height of the majority of the existing buildings in this neighborhood. It is recognized that additional housing has been mandated by both the province and regional governments through property intensification. We understand that. We're not NIMBY. We understand that. It's what has to fit in with this thing here. That council considers as part of any future development then for this property that the majority of the existing housing type in this neighborhood is made up of low density single family or street townhouse type developments, not 6-story property buildings. And finally, that council, as part of any future development agreement for this property, preserve as many of these existing trees on this property. Some of these trees are a minimum of 80 years old, and their removal would be a significant loss to the neighborhood and the local environment. Right now, the way that this property is being developed and proposed for development there would be no way for them to maintain those trees. They will have to go. Thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whitelaw, for taking the time to appear before council. I now will turn to the deputy clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We will bring in our second public speaker, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy, when you're ready, you have the floor.
Well, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Mr. Whiteshaw covered that very well, to be honest with you. I just had a couple small things to add to it. First off, thank you for allowing me to speak and working at 7:13 at night. I appreciate that. So the building is 72 feet. And based on all the bylaws and everything like that, I look around, I live right across the street from where this is planned to be built. The tallest building is roughly about 25 feet. So the township sent out notices to 120 meters. And 120 meters at a building that height is nowhere close to the area that would be affected. If I were to walk down Welland Road, I would see that building for over a kilometer. So that'd be my first issue there. All the public comments are actually correct. The size, the traffic, the value to the houses around it. There's no bus routes as well. The reports sent in by the consultants and everything, we have to keep in mind that these people are also paid by the builder. And this building would be financially viable based on all the homeowners around who have spent their money to keep the houses nice in an area where that building would profit based on 48 units. What else do I have? So there is a mention that only 25 people showed up to attend the meeting. Myself personally, I received my mail and looked at it and didn't make it in time. And if this was sent out to say 500 meters or 750 meters, I'm sure that you'd have a couple hundred people showing up for that. And that would be everything. Thank you very much.
Very good, Mr. Kennedy. Again, thank you for coming to council or appearing before council with your concerns. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will bring in our third speaker, Ms. Yang.
Excellent. Ms. Yang, whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Ping. Yeah, I just moved to this area 3 years ago, January 2020. I moved here because I love the small town of Pearland. I moved from Toronto, North York to here because of the small town feels. But right now seems like it's being destroyed. If the 6 high-story buildings building there, I'm considering this is not the town I'm looking for. Okay, thank you for listening to me. So I really do like this idea. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Ms. Yang, for your presentation. And we thank you for appearing before council. I turn to the deputy clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to Ms. Hand.
Ms. Hand, whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Councillor, Chair, towns people and viewing public. I really appreciate this opportunity. As many of the people who have attended tonight, I do not support the proposed rezoning or the dwelling. My name is Sandra, and if you don't mind, if I could take you down just a bit of a journey to why we feel so overwhelmed with this. 8 years ago, my husband and I moved to Michaela Crescent from a busy town. And of course, like others, we picked it because it was a quiet residential area. We live on Michaela, which is across the street from this proposed building. When we purchased this property, there was an open field between ourselves and Welland Road. And after 2 years of construction, there began a building of a 24-hour gas station.
Ms. Hand, we lost you. Madam Clerk?
Sorry, I believe that the power just went out very briefly.
There's increased traffic on Welland Road, which was already identified. And also there's more visitor parking on our road. The aesthetics of their neighborhood has changed. It's been too much. 3 years ago, a plot of land between our backyard and the gas station was purchased, and a designer was given the thumbs up to build multiple houses on a very narrow plot of land. After 3 years of construction, a tall townhouse has been built. This 3-story townhouse complex elevated now enough that we now have lost our privacy in our backyard. We anticipate more construction, more buildings, more homes in our backyard. It's been a lot. When we received notice from this regarding this application of amendment of 105, as you can imagine, our first thoughts were, it's just too much. And here's a little bit more. And again, these have been reiterated with other folks, and I apologize for repeating, but I hope you feel our passion. Again, the aesthetics of the neighborhood with this overwhelming building that will be seen for miles. The increased traffic. This road is only 2-lane traffic road. And if turning into our road at this current time leads to backing up traffic right into the intersection of Pelham and Welland, adding 48 more residents will cause even more backup right into the intersection. And as is illustrated earlier, we have an issue with temporary parking on our road now, and increasing this building with 48 people will also increase the temporary parking on a road. This whole thing again has changed the impact of the property value. And the other, and my last point again, is reiterating the light pollution. With this increased construction, an apartment building with their security lighting around the building, also when the building themselves, the apartments themselves are turning on the lights. Are also, of course, are looking at future. Will this set a precedent for future building once the church decides to sell the land? It's all too much. I hope you will take this in consideration with our concerns when you're delivering on the rezoning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hand, for your presentation and for appearing before council. I turn to the deputy clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to Mr. Goldhawk.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goldhawk, when you're ready, you have the floor. Are you there, Mr. Goldhawk?
Am I here now?
Up, you are now. We hear
There we
you
go.
loud and clear.
The mute button.
There we go.
Okay. Mayor Junkin, council and staff, thank you for this opportunity to speak regarding the requested zoning bylaw amendment for 105 Welland Road. My name is Dana Goldhawk. My wife, Karen, and I have lived at 22 Woodside Square for the past 30 years. We moved here from Kitchener and settled on Woodside Square as it met our criteria of a nice home situated in what appeared and turned out to be a quiet neighborhood. Also, the small town atmosphere of Fonthill was and continues to be very appealing to us. We recognize and accept small towns must grow to remain viable, and with growth comes real estate development. On the other hand, we feel the best new real estate developments consider the existing neighborhood as well as the neighbors they wish to join. This is particularly true when considering construction in a fully mature neighborhood such as ours. The homes situated north of and west along Welland Road for just about as many blocks as you care to choose have been in place for 30 years or more. It's a sea of 1- and 2-story single-family homes and townhouses. So our objection to the subject proposal begins, but does not end, with the belief that a 6-story building being 3 or 4 times taller than any of its neighbors and taller than any building in South Pelham does not blend in with or integrate into its immediate surroundings. Right now, from our back patio, we currently enjoy a wonderful open-air view of the surroundings. If this project is completed as proposed, our view will mainly consist of brick, mortar, and glass, full stop. Regarding shadows, we acknowledge that seasons bring about changes in the sun's angle. However, for much of the year, Woodside properties see the morning sun rise above the church and then shine into our backyards. Hunter's Court sees the sunlight a little sooner as the church doesn't block their view quite as much. Unfortunately, the maximum blockage by this 6-story building will coincide with the time of year when the days are shorter and sunlight is at a premium. The bordering properties will permanently miss the morning sun for several hours each day. Regarding trees, the Upper Canada study makes many comments regarding the importance of mature trees, and we agree with those points. On page 10, there's a claim to maintain many of the mature trees along the shared property lines, and there's comments regarding the ability of the trees to screen and filter dust, noise, light, pollution, provide effective privacy screening between the condo residents and the perimeter residents. On page 28, they claim existing trees along the single detached line, which is Woodside Square, and the townhouse boundaries are to be maintained to minimize privacy issues and maximize neighborhood compatibility. On page 38, they make a very clear statement that many large mature trees along the north and west property lines will be preserved to maintain levels of separation. However, the site drawings tell a different story. The site drawings show a buffer zone of just 3 meters or 10 feet around the perimeter boundaries. The drawings reveal a central traffic laneway and outdoor parking spaces, both paved right up to the 3-meter marks to the north and much of the west boundaries. Most perimeter trees here are planted 5 to 6 meters from the property lines, which is well beyond the 3-meter buffer zone. Logic tells us trees that find themselves in the path of the laneway or within the parking spaces will be removed. Therefore, it appears all 5 mature trees along the north boundary, Woodside, will be removed. More may be at risk along the west boundary. If these trees come down, none of the related benefits highlighted in the Upper Canada study will apply. Most especially, their screening qualities will be eliminated, leaving the north and northwest perimeter properties fully exposed. Still, other trees will be cut down because of this project, The existing church parking lot must be relocated, and the south and east portion of their remaining lot has been chosen as the new site. Removal of a great many mature deciduous trees is required to accommodate this. Removal of so many trees is hardly the act of a good land steward, and it negatively impacts on the character of the entire area. We did see references to some proposed planting of new trees and shrubs throughout the site. Perhaps they think plantings of this type will sufficiently replace the existing perimeter trees. But even the fastest growing specimens will take decades to reach the height and breadth of the existing trees. They will be of little to no use for privacy for many years to come. The Upper Canada Study report says one key to integrating into existing surroundings is to hide the parking away from the Welland Roads, the south section. Page 31 of the study claims that neighborhood compatibility is achieved by hiding parking inside the building. This may be true for the Welland Road passers-by, but for many of the shared boundary property owners, parking and parking-related traffic will be in full view, especially if those certain parameter trees are removed. We believe the need to hide parking is the result of a too tall building taking up too much of its available land space. Perhaps this explains the need to design the laneway and outdoor parking spaces as seen in the drawings. All traffic entering the complex must travel along a south to north laneway from Welland Road. Condo residents will travel to within a few feet of the Woodside property lines and make a sharp right-hand U-turn into one of two resident parking lots that lie within or below the footprint of the building. Visitor vehicles will take a similar path, but they'll turn left into above-ground visitor parking that butts up against many townhouse property lines. A regular stream of vehicle headlights will shine directly at north boundary properties. That's going to be intrusive by day, but even more so after sunset. And they'll generate road noise pollution as they travel along the path. Similarly, when residents leave the enclosed parking lots, their headlights will shine for a time directly into Woodside Square and Hunter's Court yards, and it'll generate noise as they accelerate along that laneway. This is disturbing in terms of enjoying our backyards, but more so when considering bedroom windows that are pointed in the direction of this project. Assuming the mature trees along the north boundaries are coming down, light pollution will pour in from living quarters and the general lighting required for the building entrances and parking facilities. Many condo residents will have an unencumbered sightline into every backyard of the north and some of the west townhouses. And running westward along Woodside Square, at least 6 backyards will be fully exposed. The developer wants out-of-site parking to create a more pleasant streetscape view at the south end. If access to the out-of-site parking was situated near the Welland Road entrance, interaction with the perimeter properties would be minimal and perhaps save some trees along the way. Regarding road congestion, from the Pelham Road, Welland Road intersection, there will be 6 points of traffic entrance and exit in a short distance of approximately 160 yards. That being the new church parking lot, condo parking, Circle K gas bar and adjoining health services plaza, the new townhouse development that's under construction, Hunter's Court, and Michaela Drive. There'll be 2 more for a total of 8 if you go another 100 yards to where Welland Road intersects with Woodside Square and Quaker Road. There's already a risky blind sight on Welland Road that begins at Hunter's Court. People looking to turn off Woodside Square in any direction cannot see oncoming westbound traffic until it's about 50 yards away. This problem can only worsen with any increased traffic coming from the new condo and/or new townhouse sites. And it's hard to imagine that so many entrance-exit points won't lead to additional congestion and risk in this stretch of road over the long haul. Regarding intensification, page 31 of the study states that 105 Welland Road is not designated intensification area or intensification corridor under the official plan. If it's not so designated, why are we trying to force the issue? The developer's justification comments seem tone deaf when trying to sell the need to build an overly large building that cannot be anything but incompatible to this mature neighborhood that we live in. On page 33 of the study, it mentions the new townhouse development across the road. Calls them transitional construction, representing an evolution towards buildings like the proposed apartment building. Those townhouses are two-story homes. They have a walkout basement, living space on the main floor, and bedrooms on the second floor. That's it. Concluding these set up the neighborhood for a six-story residential building seems a stretch. Regarding property values, we cannot accurately assess the financial impact this development will have on our properties. But the real estate mantra of location, location, location suggests it will not be favorable to us. Now, as stated earlier, we are not against growth. We are not against development. However, we do believe that development should be well thought out with a goal to enhance and blend in with its potential surroundings. Above all, we feel strongly that a new development should not hurt those whose borders it will share. The subject project shows too little regard toward the character of the existing neighborhood, compatibility, and blending in with its surroundings. It's a behemoth against all of its neighbors. We are not alone in our opposition to the proposal as submitted. We were part of a small group that knocked on neighborhood doors and managed to collect over 500 handwritten signatures on a petition that asked council to reject the proposal. Now, we've highlighted a number of ways it's certain to hurt the existing neighbors on the shared boundary lines. Private and comfortable use of their yards in too many cases will be a thing of the past. Therefore, we respectfully ask that council, based on the proposal as currently outlined, reject the request for zoning bylaw amendment. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Goldhawk, taking the time to appear before council. We now turn to the deputy clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, our next public speaker is Ms. Carter.
Okay. Ms. Carter, whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Mayor Duncan, councilors, town staff, the developers, and Pelham neighbors, good evening. Thank you for considering the views and opinions of the residents who will be most impacted by this development and the citizens of the community of Pelham. The relationship between the people who call Pelham home and those who make decisions about its structure is the basis of our democracy. In these times when democracy appears to be on shaky ground worldwide, I thank you for the opportunity to participate and ask you to do more than listen. I ask you to seriously consider our input on the ground that we call home, alongside the substantial impact and influence of the developers. Building a town is a two-way process. Welland Road began as a horse trail. As families settled along the trail, a road was built and then improved with better surfaces, stop signs, and other enhancements. The citizens enjoyed a better road, and the town saw an increase in the number of people who wanted to settle here and in the tax base that keeps the community going and growing. It was a win-win situation, the way a partnership between a town and its citizens should work. Although the town has changed over the past 100 plus years, in that we now welcome residents to built up subdivisions and farms and property that are largely already established, the relationship between the people who live here and you who make decisions about its design and purpose is the same. It takes both to create a community. We all pay taxes that keep this community going, and we all vote for the individuals that represent us. Each of us gets one vote for our mayor and council members. A business owner doesn't get more than one vote. A developer doesn't get more than one vote. A cannabis growing operator doesn't get more than one vote. In this way, we're all equal. The kind of two-way decision-making that I'm referring to, community engagement, is important. In fact, it's the basis of our democracy. The word democracy comes from the Greek words demos, meaning people, and kratos, meaning power. So democracy can be thought of as power of the people, a way of governing which depends on the will of the people. And I know that some of you think the same. A few of you councillors told me that you like it when people know what's going on in Pelham. Because when the citizens know what's going on and when they're engaged in the decisions, they are going to make sure that the decisions are in line with the quality of life that they expect and with their expectations for their health and their families. It's likely that the councillors I'm referring to, the ones that suggested that it's good to know what's going on in the town, know the first statement of the town's official plan by memory. And it's likely that the councillors I'm referring to take these words to heart. Here's the first statement of the town's official plan. The primary purpose of the official plan is to provide the basis for managing growth that will support and emphasize the town's unique character, diversity, civic identity, rural lifestyle, and heritage features. And this is the important part, to do so in a way that has a positive impact on the quality of life and health for the citizens who live and work in Pelham. The document goes on to say the official plan is the primary planning document that will direct the actions of the town and shape growth and development. And on this basis, this plan establishes a vision for the future land use structure of the town. Let me simplify this a little. The town's official plan is to manage growth in a way that has a positive impact on the quality of life and health for the citizens who live and work in Pelham. Tonight you've heard, and I understand you'll hear more, serious concerns about this proposed development, most of them relating to the quality of life and the health of citizens that live around the building site. We're not exaggerating. We have 510 signatures, physical signatures, signatures that we obtained, a small group of us, door to door in cold weather, leading up to Christmas and the holidays, disturbing people who were having gatherings with friends and family dinners. We didn't do this because we're old and bored or looking for some activism. We didn't do this because we're a bunch of not in my backyarders. We didn't do this because we don't like the idea of change. And Mr. Kaiser, if I can speak to this issue of change is never easy. 2 infill homes on Emmett Street or Hunter's Court development is hardly the kind of change we're looking at here with a 6-story monstrosity in our backyard. We all, each one of us, believe in development, and we understand that there will likely be something built at 105 Welland Road. We also created an online petition. Now, I know the town does not have any official policy for accepting online petitions, the likes of change.org, but you need to know that over 600 people signed that online petition, rejecting the rezoning of the proposed building site for the purpose of erecting a 6-story condominium. And just so you know that those online petitions have some value, you may want to consider changing your policy. Half of those people who signed the online petition were from Fonthill. So add up 510 and 306, over 800 signatures from people who live here in Fonthill basically said, we don't think that this development will have a positive impact on the quality of life and health for the citizens who live and work in Pelham. I don't know a lot about any of the council members. What I do know is that there is a wide range of expertise, impressive expertise in the background and experience of you, the mayor and councillors. What I know is that you got the votes because we and the rest of the citizens in Pelham had faith that you would represent our views. You have the capacity in spades to come up with creative solutions to our housing problem. You have the ability to think beyond build up or build out. Growth in the town is more complex than that. And I hope tonight we've showed you that. And I'm sure at this point you want to tell me how complicated it is. with demands from the region and the province and the federal government. I'm asking you to dig deep, to work with each other and find solutions that honor your commitment to follow the official plan and to honor your commitment to listen to citizens. 510, that's the conservative number. That's a lot of citizens. Let me end by telling you a little bit about our door-to-door efforts. Most people signed the petition without hesitation. Some did not want to get involved, but a surprising number of people said, I'll sign it, but it won't make any difference. Or good luck with that, council will just do what they want. This was very discouraging to me and to our small group, as we really believe that each of us makes a difference. And we really believe in democracy, a way of governing that depends on the will of the people. I ask you, do you want to live in a town where citizens believe that it doesn't matter? Council will just do what they want to do. And do you want to be governing while knowing that the citizens believe that their voices don't matter? I thank you for your time and consideration of our efforts, our voices, and our concerns.
We thank you, Ms. Carter, for taking the time to bring your concerns to council. I turn to Madam Deputy Clerk.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our next speaker, Mrs. Diduc.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Diduc, you have the floor when you're ready.
Well, thank you very much. In addition to all the observations that you've just heard from my neighbors, I have raised my family, 21 Woodside Square. Over 30 years ago, we moved from Montreal, so we well know what urban challenges there are. And along with my neighbors, we fell in love with Pelham because of that small town feel. But I have to share with you one more very important perspective today. And that is, I'm a Canadian of Ukrainian heritage, deeply affected by the genocidal war in Ukraine. And this has put many things into perspective in my life. I have become much more acutely aware in this instance of the need for affordable housing. Ukrainians fleeing the war, welcomed in Niagara, are so appreciative of the kindness and generosity of Canadians. Yet they, along with so many others in Canada, cannot dream of ever owning a home. As of this summer, the average home price in Canada was 11 times the median household income after tax. So all I'd like to say, I would like to speak to the affordable housing point. Let's do the right thing, which reflects our Canadian values of dignity and equity for all. Let's say yes to a new development at 105 Welland Road, but let's make this something we can all be proud of. And lead by example all the other municipalities that need to grow alongside us in the region of Niagara. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much for appearing before council and bringing your concerns. I turn to the Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our next speaker is Ms. Lasati.
Thank you. Ms. Lazadi, whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Hello, good evening to everybody. Thank you for giving us the chance to express how we feel about this proposal. So I will keep it short. In 2021, me and my husband moved from Toronto to this peaceful community, Fonthill, away from constant construction, pollution, traffic, to build a family and raise our child. We chose Fonthill because it was so peaceful, pleasant, and quiet. However, since we moved here in the past couple of years, we've been facing a townhouse, challenges with a townhouse construction on plot 92, which is also left unfinished, causing all kind of problems with an open pond right behind our backyard, which attracts bugs and mosquitoes and other animals. Now we're also facing this problem of a potential 6-story construction, which will inevitably increase traffic, noise, and pollution. So we are scared of, we moved from Toronto over here for specific reasons. And now we're facing some similar challenges. The concerns that we have is with this increase of traffic, how can we feel safe knowing that our child is in our driveway playing ball or playing with the kids in the neighborhood, in our street? How are we supposed to feel safe in this way, letting him bike in our road, knowing of all this increased traffic? Another point that I would like to make is both me and my husband, we work from home, and having this 6-story building will inevitably disrupt our work life because it will generate noise and disruption. Thank you for listening to our concerns, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Ms. Lazati, for bringing your concerns to council. I turn to the deputy clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our 9th speaker, Mr. Panisi.
Excellent. Mr. Panizzi, you have the floor when you are ready.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Mayor and councilors, and all the attending this meeting. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Always a challenge with technology. Thanks for the opportunity for me to make a few comments here. Again, my name is Giorgio Panici. I've lived in Fonthill for over 10 years now. My occupation is a land agent and a realtor, and I've been doing this for over 30 years, but I work mostly in large infrastructure projects all over Ontario. I would like to read from the official plan primary purpose, but Ms. Carter has already read a good portion of that, so I only want to reiterate and emphasize the last line of the primary purpose of the official plan. And it goes on to say, to do so in a way that has a positive impact on the quality of life and health for the citizens who live and work. This proposal appears to be opposite of the primary purpose. With that, I'm compelled to advise you that there are many people involved with this opposition and rejection of the proposed development that are not sleeping at night. Over 500 individual citizens in the near vicinity of the subject property have signed a petition opposing the development. As you know, we have just recently come out of a pandemic, which has taxed many citizens in all our communities. In speaking to many on my walkabout, I can see that there are struggles with anxiety, most likely triggered by this proposed development. Some are so impacted and so consumed by this proposed development that they are ready to move. Please make this point of concern your highest consideration when reviewing this proposal. In my work, I review hundreds of land appraisals for highest and best use. I make recommendations on value and design parameters that will provide a positive outcome. It is clear to me that this proposed development has already impacted property values and certainly will have a greater impact if this development was to further. The design proposal is completely out of context for the neighborhood. This has been mentioned many times with a lot of the other speakers that have just presented before you. I just want to let you know that I am not against development. However, I'm opposed to this development. The consultant had provided a number of illustrations. One in particular I just wanted to mention is the one near Timsdale building that was built in the 80s. Well, the building was there prior to the residential property on Timsdale development were in place. So they were quite aware of what was going on. It's a bit different in this community. We've been here before any large buildings were proposed to be built. So that is the greatest opposition, is to fitting in something that doesn't fit with the rest of the community. And this is what's causing the most opposition to this. Mr. Kaiser, please withdraw your application and talk to those opposing citizens and ask them what they can help you build. Engage us. We will help you. Thank you for receiving my many comments and objections to this proposal and application.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Panisi, and coming before council. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our last public speaker, Mr. Prudante.
Okay, Mr. Prudante, whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. So my name is Daniel Prudente, and I am a member of Next Niagara, who is a group of young professionals and entrepreneurs that represent part of the GNCC. So I am part of our advocacy committee, and our group has come up with 5 reasons in support of this project. The first one being the Niagara Region official plan and the Ontario government have both indicated that housing is a priority. And this type of gentle density is how we can meet our growth targets while respecting existing neighborhood and uses. The project is appropriate missing middle housing for the region and is similar to other projects around Pelham. The 48 units is on non-agricultural property. And this means that more agricultural land can be protected from greenfield development. While the units are being sold for well above what we would consider affordable, the housing stock is a good thing, and it will be opened up by individuals moving from both locally and out of town areas. This in turn will have a knock-on effect and will open up other stock beyond this development. And lastly, although we would like to see more consideration to include some affordable housing stock in this proposal, perhaps this is something that the council can advocate for if this project moves forward. And those are the points we had, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prudente, for appearing before council and bringing your concerns. I now turn to the deputy clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does conclude our pre-registered members of the public for this application. And saying that, I will just confirm that we've received no emails since that time.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, it is 7:52 p.m. and I can confirm we've received no emails. Therefore, you may close the public portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will indeed close the public portion of the meeting at the time of 7:52. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to committee input.
Okay, and Madam Clerk, is it appropriate at this time to ask the applicant if they would like to make comments on the comments brought forward by the citizens?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Kaiser, would any of your team at this time like to address any of the concerns, or are you taking this evening strictly as a listening session?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the question of the $900,000, I perhaps will turn that over to Mr. Tremere to address. I'll say that we don't know where that number came from. It's been reported, obviously, but certainly that is a number that in a canvas of our group came out of any of our mouths. So perhaps Mr. Tremere could speak to that.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I'm not sure where the 900,000 came from. We haven't developed a detailed pricing list as of yet because we haven't confirmed what our costs are. We won't know what our price point will be until we've developed our cost budget, and we can't do that until we're closer to development. But obviously, our price points will be within what the market will bear at the time that we go to market.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Kaiser.
The other point that sticks out to me was the demolition of the church I believe it was in the noise report, and certainly Mr. Hycoop can speak to that.
Mr. Hycoop?
Yeah, to you, Mr. Mayor and the councilors, and yeah, it was just a report typo. The plans, the plans that we have provided to the noise consultant, and there was no indication that that was ever the case. Quite frankly, the church is supposed to retain the part of the property, the 1 acre piece along the Pelham Street frontage. The intent is that this proposal provides them for a future there, and by no means was that the intent. I think it was just a typo. Unfortunately, I missed that in the review of my report, so I just wanted to provide that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser?
I'm not sure. William, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
Well, I think, you know, there's a general theme with the comments. We certainly will be providing a response letter following the public meeting, kind of outlining a more detailed response in writing. So I don't feel like it's appropriate to touch on too many of the issues right now. I think our presentation gave a good overview of our perspective on compatibility and what's appropriate for this site, really considering the new comprehensive zoning bylaw and what standards are within that bylaw. I think it's important to understand the changing urban fabric, not only of Pelham, but the rest of the greater Golden Horseshoe, as we absorb a lot of the growth coming into Canada and Ontario. So I think everyone's expectations on what the town of Pelham is something that needs to be reflected more appropriately with what the official plan says. And I know there's a lot of things in the official plan, a lot of good things that are supposed to build good communities. And I think there's certain attributes that are really being latched onto tonight, but that official plan is supposed to be read in its entirety, bringing in all of the necessary components that build a community and build a sustainable place, not only for today, but for tomorrow's generation. And I think that is really an important note moving forward, that we think about where we're going to be in 2051. What is the town going to look like? And if this is here for the next 30 years, I think it will certainly be a positive contribution. So as I indicated, we'll be responding further to all the various items brought up, been taking notes, and we hope to provide counsel with that. You know, if there's any questions, anything that you'd like to find out, we're certainly here to answer those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haycoop. So then, without further ado, I will now open this meeting to committee, meaning 2 council members. So council, committee, any comments, questions on either the presentation or concerning residents' concerns? Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the architect. Is this building designed to be zero carbon or carbon neutral and designed with sustainable construction concepts?
To the architect?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Mr. Hildebrand, we are designing this building to comply with the Ontario Building Code, which includes substantial standards that deal with energy efficiencies. So net carbon zero is a specific program that can be applied to particular projects similar to LEED. We find the Ontario Building Code, and those, I'm just going to backtrack a second. And generally speaking, when you embrace those particular components like LEED and net carbon zero, you're actually embracing a brand, and the Ontario Building Code seeks to include for those components in energy efficiency, etc. So to answer your question, the building will be very efficient in design, and meet the requirements established by the Ontario Building Code currently.
Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the architect. The Ontario Building Code does not require you to have zero carbon design or carbon neutral design or use sustainable construction techniques. It does require energy efficiency, but using concrete construction like you're planning does not plan for the future, in my view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Hildebrand. Any other comments, questions? I see Councilor Kerr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in listening, there were a significant number of comments relative to the trees, the buffer plantings, etc. I would offer a suggestion to the applicant that they look at retaining a certified arborist to completely review the drawings and the delineations of the markings for traffic patterns, the roadways, etc., and the implications, so that there's something in detail rather than saying landscape preserved, that there's a little more meat to the subject per se, to indicate relative to those trees that potentially may be injured, and also potential trees that may be removed, and what are the mitigation practices and maybe species. That may be more specific to site plan, but this may be part of an application to offset some of the concerns of the residents, one way or the other, but at least a formal arborist review would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments, questions? I see Councilor Nesnick.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for listening to some of my concerns and questions through you, Mr. Mayor. So we've heard about overwhelming opposition to the height and the breadth of this building on a small 1 acre property. The number of variances that this building requires, to me, is excessive. So they even have to alter the church building in order to sit close to that one side of the property lot. I do appreciate that the building has been put in the far southeast corner, as far away from the residents' built homes as possible. But I do have a great concern with regards to the trees along the north property. Those will be coming out, and that will open that exposure to the traffic and the cars going into that parking lot. And in a just estimation, the 50 spaces that are underground going up and down that garage door will open between 100 and 200 times per day. To me, again, the noise of that garage going up and down will be intrusive on the neighbors. So at the moment, I'm just asking that the developer go back to the drawing board, reduce the size of this building. The height is too excessive, as my opinion as well. The shadows are overwhelming on all property sides, and I don't feel that I can support the development as it is presented tonight.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor. Any other questions or comments for either the citizens or the applicant? And I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant has provided a shadowing study, but for whatever reason, they didn't make an awful lot of comment in their presentation about the shadowing. I submit that there is no regulations that I'm aware of to state what amount of shadowing is acceptable or not. But I would suggest that the planners comment that shadowing impacts on the adjacent single, detached, and townhouse properties are limited to several hours in the morning throughout the year. I just find that several hours of sunlight being taken away from the neighboring properties is more than excessive. We all hear about health benefits of sunlight. People are more depressed when there's lack of sun, and you can look at that right now. in January and in February, we have a lack of sun, and it affects people's psyche. Several hours throughout the year, several hours in the morning, constantly throughout the year is going to negatively impact the residents. So that's just one point I want to hammer home. You did hear lots of comments from residents, and I hope that you take those comments into consideration of this development.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? I see Councillor Olson.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, sir.
Just get rolling there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and I wanted to say thank you to the presenters for a very comprehensive presentation, and to all the people who had comments tonight. My concern is about the church parking lot, and I want to ask a question of our planner, Ms. LaRock. Principles of planning. I think if I look at locations in the town, it appears to me that our preference is that the parking go behind the buildings and the buildings face the street. And this one, if I might put it so bluntly, it looks like it's going to look like a used car lot on that corner. Am I wrong in saying that we do have a principle that says that the parking should be behind the building or behind some other structure so it's not directly on the street like that?
Ms. LaRock?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Olson. Typically, we do encourage that parking areas are shielded from the roadway, either behind a building or to the side. But in this case, we are working with an existing building and the existing building entrances. And so the church has requested, and it's their preference, that the parking area remain in the area that it's shown on the site plan. As an alternative, they are proposing some enhanced landscaping. And since I really haven't been privy to those conversations with the church and their preferences, perhaps Mr. Kaiser would like to add on to that.
Mr. Kaiser?
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. Mr. Mayor, through you. Yes, in terms of conversation with the church and the development of the site plan, as Shannon alluded to, the entrance, the handicap entrance, those type of things are all situated in close proximity to the new parking lot that's being created. And the church is supportive of that direction, and in fact thinks it'll make it a much better facility for them when it's completed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Back to you, Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I saw some landscaping designs, and that appears like there's going to be shielded by trees. I just don't think that the principle of good planning is to have parking lots right up to the street like that. And I prefer some greater mitigation or some other form of other location for that, if I could. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again to the presenters. One of the other detailed design questions I had was there's no comment with regards to electrical supply, as I know this unit will require a new transformer and all that. Other than the comment was made in the information provided to us councilors that all of it will be underground. I think that needs to be addressed when information comes back from the consultant to council. In summary, I agree with Councillor Miznik and Councillor Wink's comments. As proposed, I cannot support this type of development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. Any other comments at this time from committee, either comment, questions? Oh, Councillor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. A question to our planner, Ms. LaRock. I was wondering if you heard from the Niagara District School Board as to the need for their comments on the development.
Ms. LaRock?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We did not receive a response from the Niagara District School Board to the circulation. We don't always hear. Typically, they only respond to us on subdivision applications.
Yes, thank you. My purpose in asking this question is we have institutional properties intended for schools and retirement homes, and I want to make sure that those types of lands are still available, and I would appreciate hearing something from that. It's not necessary tonight, but I would prefer to have something that says there's no concerns on the part of NDSB. I'd also like to ask about institutional properties. Is there a shortage of them in the community? I know there's a shortage of residential properties available for residential building. Is there anything to say that we have enough institutional properties?
Any comments on that, Ms. Luak?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't really done an inventory to assess how many institutional properties we have available in the town. Typically, the institutional zoning has been applied where we have those longstanding institutional uses. So where we have churches and potentially schools, daycares, that type of thing. But it's not typically a zone that we apply on a vacant site. It's more so to recognize where we have an existing use.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Again, any other comments or questions from committee? Not seeing any at this time. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the applicant, Mr. Kaiser, and your team for making a very thorough presentation to council tonight. And of course, we also want to thank all the residents who took the time to appear before council by Zoom. It's not easy to go through the technological path sometimes, but I thought we did a very good job tonight. And again, there is no decision being made tonight, and council does indeed hear your concerns, as I'm sure the applicant has also registered them. I now turn to the deputy clerk.
For you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receive report 2022-282 for information as it pertains to file number AM-07-2022, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the resolution put forward? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik. Yep.
Yes.
She was nodding. Excellent. And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the verbal presentations made by the public as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the electronic petition entitled Reject 105 Welland Road, Pelham Zoning Bylaw Amendments submitted through change.org with 638 signatures as of January 10th, 2023. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any further comments by committee? Not seeing any.
And for the vote, I'll begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to adjournment. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any further discussion? Not seeing any.
Thank you. For the vote, I'll begin with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, it is 8:14 PM and you may gavel out your meeting.
And I will, right after I again thank everyone for their time and presenting their thoughts and concerns to council. And again, of course, to the applicant for your presentation tonight. Everyone, have a good evening and good night.